My name is Natalia Ostrovska. Watch more about this in the episode. Give us a like so that as many people as possible can see the news from the TSN team. Let's get started. They survived on schemes during wartime.
They were engaged in receiving and accumulating significant amounts of money obtained through illegal means.
NABU shares details of a large-scale corruption case in the energy sector, while Zelensky calls for the dismissal of 2 ministers and imposes sanctions on those involved in the investigation. The heart of Kharkiv is on fire.
I went into the kitchen. My wife was preparing food for tomorrow. While the first explosion hit, we crouched down.
The city's historic buildings were attacked by Shaheds and there are casualties. How those who have to replace their windows for the second time are recovering from the shelling. The fate of Ukrainian refugees in the European Union. It's necessary to consider work and residence permits available for cleaners, teachers, their parents, and those who are not planned to be expelled. The Minister of Justice and the Minister of Energy must resign. This was President Volodymyr Zelensky's response to the scandalous NABU case. In his address, he also promised to impose sanctions against 2 more individuals involved in this investigation. He also announced a reboot of the management of Energoatom.
I believe that the Minister of Justice and the Minister of Energy cannot remain in their positions. This is, among other things, a matter of trust. If there are accusations, they must be addressed. The decision to suspend someone from office is the most prompt and efficient. I ask the Prime Minister of Ukraine to ensure that these ministers submit their resignations. And right now, it is extremely difficult for everyone in Ukraine to endure power outages, Russian strikes, and losses. It is absolutely unacceptable that despite all this, there are still some schemes in the energy sector. I will sign a decree imposing sanctions against 2 individuals who are involved in the NABU case regarding energy.
And Prime Minister Yulia Svyrydenko has already submitted motions to the Verkhovna Rada for the dismissal of the Ministers of Justice and Energy. She noted, and I quote, "The ministers submitted their resignations in accordance with the procedure established by law." End of quote. Earlier, a photo of the resignation letter from Minister of Energy Svetlana Hrinchok appeared online. Meanwhile, the Verkhovna Rada is ready to consider both resignations as early as Tuesday, November 18th. And now, a few more details. Hrinchok and Haloshenko are involved in a high-profile NABU case concerning corruption in the energy sector. On Monday, according to investigators, recordings were made public. In various episodes, the involvement of 4 members of the Ukrainian government from different periods was recorded. Anti-corruption officials also claimed that the amount of illicit gains received by participants in the scheme reached tens of millions of dollars. This evening, it became known that the government has submitted for consideration by the National Security and Defense Council regarding the imposition of personal sanctions against Timur Mindich and Alexander Zuckerman. The decision regarding the individuals involved in the NABU case on corruption in Energoatom was made in the evening at an extraordinary meeting of the Cabinet of Ministers. And one of the suspects in the high-profile NABU case, Timur Mindich, left Ukraine legally as the father of 3 underage children. This was stated by the State Border Guard Service. Mindich was processed for departure at one of the border checkpoints. He had all the necessary documents, and there were no restrictions or bans on his departure, the State Border Guard Service noted. Businessman and co-owner of the Kvartal 95 studio, Timur Mindich, left Ukraine on Monday early in the morning, just hours before NABU came to him with searches in a large-scale corruption case in the energy sector. And the first court hearings regarding embezzlement in the energy sector were heated and extremely emotional. Today, preventive measures were being chosen for the suspects in the high-profile corruption case involving Energoatom. The lawyers called the case a soap bubble and a media provocation. Prosecutors spent hours reading out transcripts of NABU recordings. In the end, the court partially granted the prosecutor's request to place the main suspects in custody. And how did it happen? Nelly Kowalska saw it.
Throughout the entire day, the High Anti-Corruption Court has been deciding on preventive measures for the suspects in what is perhaps the biggest corruption scandal in the history of independent Ukraine. Just a few minutes ago, a preventive measure was chosen for Ihor Myroniuk. He is considered one of the founders of the criminal scheme recorded on NABU tapes. He appears under the nickname Rocket. His preventive measure is 60 days in custody, with the possibility of posting a bail of 126 million hryvnias.
In the event that bail is posted, the suspect is subject to the following obligations: to appear before NABU detectives, SAPO prosecutors, and the investigating judge in this criminal case upon first request, depending on the stage of the proceedings, not to leave the city of Kyiv, to surrender all passports for traveling abroad and any other documents for leaving Ukraine, including the Ukrainian citizen's passport, to the State Migration Service of Ukraine for safekeeping, and to wear an electronic monitoring device.
It was Myronyak, according to the detectives, who discussed the terms of cooperation with contractors. The group received kickbacks of 10 to 15%, which were funneled out using a special mechanism known as the barrier. However, Myronyak's lawyers and defenders deny this. They say that their client never held such a position and did not have the influence necessary to carry out such actions. Please listen. We
are confident that there is no crime here, that this is a fabricated case. You heard for yourselves that the investigative body conducted all the wiretapping completely outside the law in a way that the law prohibits. So all these documents that were collected and announced have no legal significance whatsoever. Definitely, we will be filing an appeal, and we are confident that sooner or later we will achieve the release of our client from custody.
A little earlier, a preventive measure was also chosen for Dmytro Basov, who is the executive director of Energoatom. The charges against him were identical. Basov's defense attorneys denied all the prosecutor's accusations, stating that their client does not have access to the company's finances. Accordingly, he could not have been involved in the scheme. They requested any preventive measure for him, except detention in a pre-trial detention center. However, the court still chose 60 days of detention.
Individuals using their official powers as well as the influence of the Minister of Energy, Halushchenko, and their trusting relationship with him, carried out the receipt and accumulation of significant sums of money obtained illegally with the assistance and participation of officials from Energoatom.
And today, the court was choosing a preventive measure for Ihor Fursenko. He is a businessman who may have been involved in creating a conversion center, as well as several other individuals implicated in this case. Nelia Kowalska, Alexander Romaniuk, Andriy Kles, and Roman Rayepa. TSN 1+1.
How can we tackle the problem of corruption in Ukraine? How do we prevent those who later siphon off budget funds from coming to power? What do you think? How can we fight such metastases of the system? Write your thoughts in the comments. Meanwhile, I will continue with the TSN broadcast. The number of injured in Kharkiv has risen to 5, 4 of whom have been hospitalized. Due to enemy attacks in the city, there are power outages, a civilian enterprise has been damaged, as well as nearby residential buildings. TSN correspondent Yulia Boyko has already visited the scene and is ready to tell us more.
Kharkiv is under attack again. Russian drones attacked the old residential district, almost the very heart of the city. In the Kolodnohesky district, explosions rang out one after another. It was affected. Those who were at home during the explosion say everything happened so suddenly that they didn't even have time to react. Just a loud impact and a blast wave that shattered the windows and scattered debris throughout the rooms. People in these buildings are experiencing this for the second time in a year. They had just repaired the damage in the village and replaced the broken glass. And now another strike. It was
just a shock. It was literally a matter of split seconds. The windows fly out, the doors swing open. It's just impossible to describe.
We don't have a second floor, 5 windows. There's not a single window left. On the first floor, 2 windows are gone as well. Last time it was exactly the same, and this time just like that. Last time we were only saved because no one was home. We were all at work. But today I had the day off.
My wife went into the kitchen. She was cooking for tomorrow. The first explosion hit, we crouched down. Then about 3 minutes later, it hit again, and then about 5 minutes after that once more. We were terrified, really, and honestly, we're probably still shaking.
4 of the injured were hospitalized by medical workers. Another 2 residents were rescued by the state emergency service who cleared the rubble. People were trapped in their own apartments.
At the moment, we know of 3 strikes by Shaheds, Kolodnohesky district of the city of Kharkiv. Old buildings. It's morning. There were a lot of people outside. Unfortunately, only a small number of them were injured.
As a result of these strikes, 15 apartment buildings and 5 private houses were damaged. The most heavily affected was a motor transport company. It is engaged in civilian transportation and has no connection whatsoever to military facilities. At the time of the attack, about 15 people were on shift. Everyone managed to get to the shelter in time, so there were no casualties. According to the employees, this company had already become a target for the enemy earlier this summer. Back then it was restored quickly, but now everything is almost completely destroyed.
The damaged area includes office spaces and warehouses, premises, complex equipment, office equipment, and cargo that have been entrusted to us by clients for transportation. Vehicles that were on the premises. All communications.
However, the company's management says that after calculating the losses, they will once again begin restoration. Residents of the surrounding buildings are making repairs. With the help of utility workers, they are boarding up windows that had just been installed after the summer shelling. Yulia Boykut, Loksi Bugayenko, Kharkiv, TSN 1+1.
For the third day in a row, the Russians have been attacking Odessa region, trying to exhaust air defense forces and damage civilian infrastructure. Last night, the occupiers struck a building in the Peresip district. The drone hit the upper floors. A fire broke out there. But since construction on the high-rise building was not yet finished, there were no people inside, so there were no casualties. 2 people were injured in Kostiantynivka. In Donetsk region, an enemy drone struck a car carrying people. The enemy also shelled the city with artillery. There is significant destruction in Kramatorsk. There, 4 drones hit a school and an administrative building. The explosions damaged a high-rise building and a football field. Russians are staging a safari on civilians in Zaporizhzhia region. In the Polohi district, they attacked a civilian car. As a result of the drone strike, a 56-year-old man died at the scene. Another civilian was wounded in Huliaipol. And in Kharkiv region, there are 5 injured. In the Derhachi community, a Russian FPV drone hit a civilian car, injuring a 70-year-old man. In the Kupiansk district, a civilian woman was injured. In the village of Vasishchev, 3 people were wounded. The blast wave damaged a supermarket warehouse. In the Izium district, railway infrastructure came under fire. There was a fatality in the Sinelnikivsky district of Dnipropetrovsk region, where the enemy struck the Vasilkivska community with drones. A 47-year-old local resident sustained fatal injuries. Infrastructure was damaged. In Pavlohrad, shelling caused fires to break out and damaged private businesses. Forced evacuation in Zaporizhzhia region. Due to intense Russian shelling, residents of Malokaterinivka are being urged to evacuate. The village is near the regional center, but only 8 kilometers from the front line. And there are still about 150 residents remaining there. Meanwhile, in the villages of Veselyanka, Zaporozhets, Ternuvate, and Kosivtseve, mandatory evacuation has been announced for children along with their parents or guardians. In total, the evacuation teams plan to relocate 20 families, which include nearly 40 children. They are promised housing at their new location. All adults are also urged not to delay their departure. Just the day before, law enforcement officers evacuated 25 residents from the Vasilivsky and Polohivsky districts. Ukrainian units in the Zaporizhzhia direction have withdrawn from the RIVNOPILLIA area, but the enemy's advance there has been halted. This was reported by the Southern Defense Forces. Late Tuesday evening, the enemy launched a complex fire strike on Ukrainian positions in order to preserve the lives of the soldiers. The units have moved to more advantageous positions. Meanwhile, as reported by the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Syrsky, the situation has significantly worsened in the Oleksandrivka and Huliaipole directions. Ukrainian troops have completely withdrawn from Uspenivka and Novomykolaivka. The enemy has a numerical advantage in manpower and equipment, and fierce fighting continues, as well as several other settlements. The invaders are trying to cut off the logistical route leading from Pokrovsk in the Dnipropetrovsk region. And in the Pokrovsk direction, the Russians are already entering the city itself. Currently, according to our sources, there are more than 500 occupiers in Pokrovsk. Just in the past day, the enemy made 72 attempts to storm our military positions there. According to preliminary estimates, our soldiers eliminated over 100 invaders. So Pokrovsk remains one of the hottest spots on the front line. According to Commander-in-Chief Syrsky, in order to completely encircle the city, the occupiers have amassed up to 50,000 soldiers. TSN correspondent Yulia Svyrydenko published aerial footage of Pokrovsk filmed by our soldiers on her Telegram channel. Currently, the enemy's breakthrough into the city has been contained, so there are no visible close-quarters battles among the neighborhoods. Every high-rise building and enemy drones dominate the sky, and whoever has more of them holds the advantage. The EU and Canada have agreed on further support for Ukraine. This happened during a joint ministerial meeting in the Canadian city of Niagara. The parties agreed to support Ukraine both financially and militarily, in particular by playing an active role within the coalition of willing countries. They emphasized that Ukraine must have reliable and credible security guarantees to effectively protect its sovereignty and territorial integrity. And specifically, a complete and unconditional ceasefire should be the first step toward meaningful negotiations with the Kremlin. At the same time, a meeting of the G7 countries is also taking place in Niagara, and Ukraine is once again at the center of attention there. Chief diplomat Andriy Sybiha is present at the event. Earlier, our Ministry of Foreign Affairs stated that the key topics of the negotiations and the ministers' speeches in Canada are strengthening support for our country, overcoming Russian aggression, and restoring peace, as well as increasing sanctions pressure on the aggressor state and making full use of Russia's frozen assets, strengthening Ukraine's energy resilience and additional investments in the development of the Ukrainian defense industrial complex. They will be hunting down Kremlin propaganda. The European Commission has presented the Shield of Democracy program. The executive vice president of the agency, Henna Verkhovna, stated that their democracy has been under pressure and attack ever since Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The project will already be aimed at combating disinformation and hybrid threats from Russia. It will have three components: protecting the EU's information space, strengthening democratic institutions, and enhancing the resilience of society. They plan to achieve this by safeguarding information in the online space, ensuring a rapid and coordinated response, and conducting large-scale and potentially cross-border information operations. The EU also intends to strengthen media literacy among the population, especially among young people. They will be taught to recognize reliable sources and navigate the information environment. In addition, Brussels has decided to allocate up to €9 billion in additional funding for independent media, civic initiatives, and creative industries by 2034. They also plan to achieve the demonetization of false content on social networks and to create a network of fact-checkers who will detect fakes. Some projects and directions will be open to EU candidate countries as well as potential candidates in order to support them and promote mutual information exchange. That means Ukraine can also join them.